Imagine 2,500 years ago. The prophet Daniel looks up to see the angel Gabriel arriving with a message for him. It's a prophecy that speaks of wars and alliances, palace intrigue, and religious desecrations. Daniel records it all, knowing it's for a time still to come. Thousands of years later, we look back at his words and see their incredible historical accuracy. But some say it's just too good. Maybe Daniel didn't write this at all. Maybe it's actually a history book, written well after the events spoken of. What no one could have predicted was the Dead Sea Scrolls, and how they too would make a mark on this biblical controversy. Welcome to the Lucifer Project series with hosts Jon and Tricia Flagg. This is part 1 of Daniel 11. Can this prophecy actually be real?
Okay, today we are going to start a series on Old Testament prophecy.
We are, yeah.
I'm so excited about this. I'm so excited about teaching from the Old Testament in particular, because when I was a teenager and I was out kind of learning how to do ministry and things like that, I heard this phrase that has stuck with me all these years. And it was that the New Testament is in the Old Testament concealed. And the Old Testament is in the New Testament revealed.
Yep.
And I remember hearing that phrase. I think it's a pretty popular,
pretty common, yeah.
Common phrase. When I heard it, it really struck me as, wow, we need to learn about the entire Bible. And it's so important to not just study the New Testament as a Christian believer, but also study the Old Testament. And then the two of them together is really impactful.
Yep.
So what is this to you? Why is it, why do you feel like you want to talk about Old Testament prophecy in particular?
So when we first started diving into these Old Testament prophecies, I honestly thought it'd be kind of a little bit boring, and discovered quickly how wrong I was. And I think maybe like the best way to frame this is, one, of course, it is in the Bible, so we should know about it. That's a simplistic, and I understand that. So, but I think where I want to go is, imagine 4,000 years ago. It's 2000 BC or something, and you have this supernatural experience with God, or an angel shows up and they tell you something about a future event. You write it down, and then thousands and thousands of years later, that exact thing that you wrote down happens. As a believer, I'm like, wow, that is absolutely incredible. That what other proof do you need that God exists, and you see that, right? How else could this possibly have happened other than divine inspiration from God? And then it gets me, me, I always like to take it from a different angle. So then I flip that around, like, well, what happens if that Old Testament prophecy doesn't happen, or at least it doesn't happen the way that we expected it to? The atheist or the agnostic might be like, well, see, there's proof that your God doesn't exist, and that this Bible is a book written by man to control man, all the accusations, and so there's like proof to them of their belief system. And I find that really fascinating that you have two very different approaches to these Old Testament prophecies, of which all of us are probably largely ignorant of these Old Testament prophecies, right?
Right.
And then there's this third one that says, okay, but what if in the middle whatever that Old Testament prophecy was just hasn't occurred yet, right? And it's a future event that's still to come. And so really, I find these things fascinating. When you start to read what is being prophetically said, it is absolutely fascinating where we can go on three of those. We can be the God's real, we can go down this God isn't real, or we can go down this is still to come. And I really find it fascinating, that tension between all three of those. So, and what's also really fascinating is kind of these doctrines that come out of that, because there's, we're going to be talking about them in future episodes, but there's things like preterism that says every prophecy in the Bible has already been fulfilled. Right now, full disclosure, there's partial and there's full preterism, but like full preterism I can shoot down in 1 second, Daniel 9:24. But there's still a lot of people that believe that, right? So you have these different doctrines that come out of these Old Testament prophecies, and I think what a fun place to spend some time.
mankind recovers an abandoned, otherworldly spacecraft, answering the age-old question, do aliens exist? When military forces capture an inbound signal from deep space, it appears someone, or something, is returning. A long hidden web of lies and deceit begins to unravel at a Vatican observatory as a mysterious group guides the signal toward Earth. The Lucifer Project series is available on Amazon and where great books are sold. Visit theluciferproject.com for more information.
I think what we want to do in this series is, okay, well, let's look at the history. Hey, we're thousands of years advanced now with these things. And we have artificial intelligence that can really help us look at the archaeological and historical evidence of what actually happened. And we can start looking at that weird tension. Did it happen? Has it not yet happened? Did it happen in a different way? Let's just start exploring that.
Right.
And I think one of the most fascinating ones that kind of live in that space is Daniel 11, and that's why we're starting there.
Okay.
Daniel 11 is so unbelievably accurate that it spawned this whole nother doctrine or theology, if you will, in 1780, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. So I think we have to do one thing before we get into Daniel 11. Let's just do a quick definition of prophecy, really, really high level. And full disclosure, you and I both know there is a difference between how the individual operates in Old Testament prophecy versus New Testament prophecy. I fully understand that. So people are viewing like we're just going to be focusing on the Old Testament prophecies, going forward here. But simplistically for me, and you can jump in if you have a different definition, but for me it's just like these prophecies are God's like divine message to us, and they can be warnings. This is what happens if you're going to continue to live in sin and not listen to me. These are things are going to happen. They can be kind of like when you see these signs and wonders, know that something is coming, right? They can be things that kind of bring you to your faith. Like that's when I see a lot of it in the Bible. It's like, how else could these prophets say these things and know these things other than God actually telling them, right? So it's like God is real. These are all these different things that I think Old Testament prophecies bring us to. But basically it's divine revelation of God's mind, His will, His future plans, and it's meant for the Old Testament times and it's meant for now as well. Would you add anything to that, or are we good on that?
No, I would just add that it's I don't think you mentioned it. It's like the confirmation of your faith as well.
Yeah, it does bring you to your faith, absolutely. I guess that's me. It's part of like, oh my gosh, God is real. How else could these prophets have known this? And now we know that it's actually happened historically. God is real. My faith is confirmed. So yeah, 100%.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're going to take Daniel almost like a play. We're going to divide it into 3 acts. Act 1 is going to be a little bit of history, because we have to go through some world history in order to understand what the heck Daniel was talking about. We're going to go through step by step some of his specific prophecies, then tied to the world history. And we'll try to make it quick. It's a little bit of, it's a lot of detail, let's say that. So we're going to try to go fast through that. We'll skip over some stuff just for not to get too boring.
Right.
Act 2 then rolls around, which is these prophecies were so unbelievably accurate that something ain't right. We have to, there cannot be correct. It spawns a whole new doctrine in 1780. Okay, that's Act 2. And Act 3 rolls around when we have the Dead Sea Scrolls in like around the 1950s. And it really opens up this debate between the one side that says Daniel 11's real, another side says, nope, it's too accurate, it's not real. And then we have the Dead Sea Scrolls comes in and it says, well, wait, I have something to say about this.